Now, we continue to track the promises made in previous speeches ahead of tomorrow's State of the Nation address. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced last year that over 700 billion rand in infrastructure projects will be built over the next 10 years. For more on this, let's speak to Mr. Webster Mfebe. He is CEO of the South African Forum of Civil Engineering Contractors. Good to have you with us this afternoon, Mr. Mfebe. Just one day before the big State of the Nation address, where we're hoping that the President will be touching on a lot of these projects. But let's talk about the 700 billion rand over the next 10 years. What the President said is that a list has already been finalized of what he called shovel-ready projects. Have you seen this list materialize? How have you interacted with the amounts that had been touted?
Well, that has yet to be realized on the ground. What clearly has happened among those were projects that were planned in the past. For an example, the National Roads Agency, SANRAL, has recently awarded some projects under the roads program. So we're starting to see bits and pieces of the realization of some of the things that were promised, but not on a large scale. I think what is important is to look also against the promises the President made at SONA 2020 and also during the launch of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan in October last year. The fact of the matter is that the Nedbank's latest capital expenditure project listing, new projects have fallen by 60% to 32%, that being the lowest since 1993 when this study was initiated. But also one has to look within the context of the contracting economy, where it is predicted in 2020 it would have contracted by 7%. And just last month, for an example, to put in context, the IMF predicted a growth of 2.8% in 2021 compared to that predicted by our Reserve Bank and National Treasury. And clearly, how we measure this on the construction sector, it is a lived experience. For an example, the impact this has had is that 50 billion loss in capital expenditure on construction, that is from 270 billion in 2019 to 220 in 2020. That prediction, which was made by our intelligence economic market research company, represents 16% of the decline in 2020. And also not much is expected to be better in 2021, only 4%, which is predicted, which will take that to 228 billion, and still below the 270 billion we were at in 2019. Obviously, roughly expected to be lost in terms of the construction output in the sector is contracting between, as I've said, 16 and 18% in 2020. And one has to look at the lived experience, as I have said. The initial data of the value of construction tenders awarded was down by approximately 12% in 2020 compared to 2019 in real terms. The impact on the private building industry is, however, much more severe. For an example, if you look at the square meters of private buildings completed, has been down by under 49% over the rolling 12-month period ending November 2019. This translates to between 60,000 and 80,000 jobs lost in 2020, forecasted out of 900,000 formal sector construction jobs at the end of 2020. Obviously, you have to measure this against the lived experience on the ground in terms of the promised infrastructure rollout approach.
And I think on that point, that lived experience that you are shining the spotlight on, how much of this do you believe is attributable to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the various lockdown levels that we've experienced as a country?
Obviously, one has to say upfront that the construction industry has been in a decline even prior to the onset of the COVID pandemic. COVID pandemic has exacerbated the situation in the construction sector, and now what is needed is what the president promised in terms of proper planning and execution, increasing the capacity within the government, within the state to be able to do that. We are not convinced that the government has the requisite capacity to undertake a project of this magnitude, given the exodus of skills from government into the private sector and also overseas looking for greener pastures. So it is important that the government focuses on the capacity of the state by making sure that you have the right to undertake this massive program, that it is out to market quickly than expected.
So let me ask you this, Mr. Mfebe, given the fact that we are still in the midst of the COVID-19 vaccine, what do you hope the president will focus on tomorrow as far as infrastructure development is concerned? Perhaps a message that will be relatable, a message that can be implementable, and a plan that can be implementable given the current economic structure as well as the pandemic process that we're currently in?
Obviously, we expect the president to be clear on the practical plans of this rollout of the infrastructure. The intention to roll out the infrastructure is not enough. We need detailed plans in terms of when this infrastructure will be rolled out, when will it come into the market so that South Africa becomes a biggest single construction site that will ignite economic activity from the supply side, which supplies the construction sector, which is manufacturing and other hardware stores, in order to kickstart the economy. He must be very clear on those plans, and also the consultation with the players in the infrastructure sector, in particular my sector, which represents about 70% of the total construction subsector in South Africa, that we are kept abreast in terms of the plans and that we are involved early. We have been crying for early contractor involvement in the planning and execution of these plans.
Mr. Mfebe, we'll have to unfortunately leave it at that for this afternoon, but thank you so much for your insight as well as your expectations of the President's State of the Nation address tomorrow. That's Mr. Webster Mfebe, the CEO of the South African Forum of Civil Engineering Contractors.